The War Council of the Seven Systems gathered in their traditional circular chamber aboard the massive station Krenthox, a name that roughly translated to place of important decisions, though most species agreed it more accurately meant where bloated politicians waste oxygen. The chamber hung suspended in the heart of the station, a perfect sphere with black walls, studded with dim purple lights that pulsed in time with the station's massive power core. 13 hover platforms arranged in concentric rings floated at various heights, each bearing representatives from the mightiest species of the Galactic Confederation. Honored representatives boomed Grand Counselor Vex Noron, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence as his gray, wrinkled skin flushed a pale blue with authority. We convened this emergency session amid troubling developments from the Outer Rim. His voice echoed dramatically around the chamber, an effect he'd spent centuries perfecting. Some said he practiced in waste disposal chambers during off-cycles. Commander Blyde of the Zarkonian Defense Fleet snorted, causing his nasal spines to flare. "Spare us the theatrics, Vex. Some of us have actual wars to get back to." "Wars you're not exactly winning," chirped Diplomatic Minister Kara Tass, her feathered crest rising in amusement. The small, bird-like alien smoothed her iridescent ceremonial robes with her 3-fingered hands. "Perhaps if the mighty Zarkonian fleet spent less time retreating and more time fighting, we wouldn't need this meeting." Blyde's upper lip curled back, revealing serrated teeth. Bold words from a species whose greatest military achievement was developing colorful parade uniforms. "Silence!" Vex Noron's voice boomed, his amplification device cranked to maximum. Several delegates clutched their auditory organs in pain. This petty bickering is precisely why the Supreme Overlord is called for. "The Supreme Overlord isn't here," interrupted Science Director Plexzun R.A., her 8 eyes narrowing simultaneously. The arachnoid scientist's manipulator limbs clicked rapidly against her data pad. "According to my calculations, he's approximately 72 cycles late." Again. A low murmur spread through the chamber. The Supreme Overlord Drek Thar the Magnificent, a title he'd given himself during a particularly self-important speech, was notorious for dramatic entrances, but even this was excessive. "He's likely polishing his ceremonial armor," muttered Resources Minister Ganpol, his gelatinous form rippling with suppressed laughter. "I heard he added another 14 medals to it last week, for bravery in looking at pictures of battlefields." Vex Noron's skin darkened with frustration. "The Supreme Overlord faces unprecedented challenges managing our conflict with the expanding territories. Show some respect." "Expanding territories," sneered Tactical Advisor Jo Hol Carr, her reptilian tail twitching against her command chair. "Can we stop with the euphemisms? Call them what they are: humans." The word fell into the chamber like a thermal detonator. Several delegates visibly flinched. "They're just primates," insisted Trade Baron Volksfen, though his tentacles curled nervously around his hover platform's railing. "Barely space-capable. The Supreme Overlord assured us they would be contained to their solar system." "That was before they bypassed our quantum barrier at Proxima Centauri," Joel Carr responded, pulling up a holographic display showing the remains of what had once been the Confederation's most formidable defensive line. "And before they somehow reverse-engineered our phase shift technology in, about 2 of their Earth weeks." "Isolated incidents," Vex Noron insisted, though his secondary hearts were clearly racing, visible through his translucent ceremonial vestments. "The Supreme Overlord has assured the Council that his new strategic initiative will contain these creatures to their current territories." "His last strategic initiative got 3 fleet groups vaporized," Commander Blyde growled. "My cousin commanded one of those ships. The humans sent back his ceremonial blade. Just his blade, with a note saying they respected worthy opponents, the absolute nerve of these primates." Science Director Zunra's manipulators tapped frantically. "My analysis suggests their technological adaptation rate exceeds anything we've encountered in 7,000 cycles of interstellar history. They're not just learning our technology, they're improving it." "Nonsense," huffed Vex Noron. "The Supreme Overlord himself has assured me that." The massive doors to the chamber slid open with a pneumatic hiss, and the Council fell silent. The Supreme Overlord always made grand entrances, typically preceded by his honor guard and accompanied by blaring ceremonial horns. But there were no horns, no honor guard, just silence and footsteps. Strange, heavy footsteps that didn't match any known Confederation species. And then, into the War Council of the Seven Systems, strode a lone human dot. What in the 7 moons of Krelldex is that, gasped Resource Minister Ganpol, his gelatinous form quivering so violently it nearly lost cohesion. The human stood just under 2 meters tall, clad in what appeared to be modified Confederation battle armor, black, with strange red markings, but with significant alterations. Where Confederation armor was bulky and ornate, this was sleek and functional. The human's face remained uncovered, revealing pale skin, short dark hair, and eyes that seemed unnervingly calm. Most disturbing was what the human carried: a stasis field projector, within which floated an unmistakable object. "Is that?" stammered Vex Noran, his 4 eyes blinking rapidly out of sequence, a sign of extreme distress among his species. "The head of Supreme Overlord Drek Thar the Magnificent." "Why, yes, it is," the human said, voice unexpectedly melodious. The human female, according to the intelligence briefings, smiled. Not the threatening baring of teeth that most species employed, but something far more unsettling. She looked amused. "Though between us, the magnificent part seems a bit generous." He whimpered quite pathetically toward the end. Pandemonium erupted in the chamber. Security alarms blared. Commander Blyde drew his ceremonial blade with a roar. Trade Baron Volk's Fenn's hover platform shot upward in panic, crashing into the ceiling. Diplomatic Minister Kara Tass fainted, her iridescent feathers molting in shock, a biological response her species hadn't evolved past. Guards bellowed. Vex Noran, "Seize the intruder." The human sighed dramatically, reached to her belt, and pressed a small device. Immediately, the chamber's security doors sealed shut with a heavy thunk. "Your guards are currently enjoying a nice nap, courtesy of a compound my people synthesized from your own naval stun weapons." She casually tossed the severed head still contained in its stasis field onto the central platform. It landed with a sickening thud and rolled, coming to rest with Drek Thar's 4 dead eyes staring directly at Vex Noran. "By the way, your station security is embarrassingly easy to bypass. We've been studying the blueprints for, almost a full Earth day." Tactical advisor Jo Holkar's tail lashed angrily, but her eyes revealed calculation rather than panic. "You can't possibly think you'll leave this station alive, human." "Commander Alexandra Reeves, Earth Defense Force," the human replied with a little mock bow. "And I absolutely plan to leave alive, with all of you intact as well, provided we understand each other." She smiled again, running a hand through her short black hair. "Though I should mention that there are currently 17 other humans aboard this station, each holding positions at rather crucial engineering junctions. Life support, gravity generation, the fun stuff that keeps everyone from experiencing explosive decompression." Science Director Zunray's manipulators moved frantically over her data pad. "Impossible. Our sensors would have detected us? With the sensor jamming technology we reversed engineered from the ships you sent to bombard New Beijing." Commander Reeves laughed, the sound echoing unnervingly around the chamber. "We improved that too, by the way. Yours only works at short range. Ours can cloak an entire battle cruiser. The one currently sitting 50 kilometers off your starboard bow, for instance." Vex Noran's skin had turned pale gray, the color of extreme terror in his species. You killed the Supreme Overlord," he whispered, unable to tear his 4 eyes away from the severed head. "He commanded our most elite forces, his personal guard numbered in the thousands. His flagship was." "Impressive, I'll grant you that." Reeves nodded appreciatively. "All those spikes and flame-throwing turrets. Very intimidating. Completely impractical, of course, but points for style." Commander Blyde, still clutching his ceremonial blade, growled, How did you penetrate his defenses?" Commander Reeves walked casually around the chamber, examining the ornate decorations with the air of a tourist in a slightly disappointing museum. "Well, that's actually an interesting story. You see, while your Supreme Overlord was busy giving grandiose speeches about crushing humanity beneath his, and I quote, 17 magnificent hooves of destiny, by the way, he only had 12. We counted. We were busy studying every transmission, every battle tactic, every weapon signature." She paused by a particularly pompous portrait of Drek Thar, considering it with a tilted head. "Nice likeness, though it's missing the look of complete surprise when my team and I walked into his personal chambers during his sleep cycle." She turned back to the council, her amusement fading, expression hardening. "Now, shall we discuss the terms of our arrangement?" Or should I signal my team to demonstrate what happens when you reroute a quantum core's feedback loop through the gravity generators? The War Council of the Seven Systems, for the first time in its 8,000-year history, fell completely, utterly silent. For those who might not be familiar with Drek Thar's complete resume. Commander Reeves continued, pulling up a chair meant for a species with significantly different anatomy and somehow making herself comfortable in it. Allow me to refresh your memories. It might help explain why his head is currently decorating your council table. Science Director Zun Ra chittered nervously, her 8 eyes darting between the human and the hovering head. We are all quite familiar with the Supreme Overlord's accomplishments. Humor me, Reeves replied, propping her boots on the edge of the council table. Several delegates gasped at the breach of protocol. Think of it as story time. Humans love a good story almost as much as we love surviving attempted genocide. Vex Noran swallowed hard, his throat sac inflating and deflating rapidly. Drek Thar the Magnificent rose from humble beginnings as a military tactician during the Hive Wars. He committed his first atrocity at the Battle of Nex Prime, interrupted Reeves, examining her gloved fingernails, where he tested his experimental bioweapons on the civilian population. 12 million dead, wasn't it? But the Confederation overlooked that little indiscretion because he won. The Hive were brutal opponents, protested Trade Baron Volaxfen, his tentacles coiling defensively. Extreme measures were necessary too. Save it, Reeves cut him off with a wave. We've accessed your historical archives. The Hive had already offered surrender terms. Drek Thar just wanted to see if his new toys worked. She leaned forward. They did. Quite effectively. Just like the weapons he decided to test on New Shanghai 3 months ago. 4 million human civilians. Men, women, children, pets were quite fond of our pets, by the way. A heavy silence fell across the chamber. Several council members couldn't meet her gaze. After his success in the Hive Wars, Commander Blyde reluctantly continued. Drek Thar revolutionized our military structure. His tactical brilliance was unparalleled. You mean his willingness to sacrifice troops to achieve personal glory? Reeves corrected. We studied his battle records. He had the highest casualty rates among his own forces of any Confederation commander in history. But hey, he looked great in the victory parades, right? Kara Tass, having recovered from her fainting spell but still missing patches of feathers, spoke softly. The Supreme Overlord united the Seven Systems when we were on the brink of civil war. Whatever his methods, he brought stability to. Through fear, Reeves finished. He executed his political rivals and called it streamlining government efficiency very tidy. We humans have had dictators like that too. We tend to remove their heads eventually as well, though usually through democratic processes rather than literally. She gestured toward the stasis field. I suppose we're still evolving as a species. Tactical advisor Joel Carr's reptilian features remained impassive, but her tail had stopped its angry lashing, a sign of reluctant respect among her kind. What you fail to understand, human, is that Drek Thar was the only leader strong enough to maintain order across multiple species with conflicting interests. His methods were harsh, but effective. Let's talk about effectiveness, Reeves interrupted again, standing suddenly and pacing around the table. 7 months ago, your precious Supreme Overlord declared humanity a biological infection requiring sterilization, his exact words. He promised the complete eradication of humanity within 1 standard galactic year. He commissioned the construction of 50 world killer vessels. He declared himself the exterminator of Earth and added it to his already ridiculously long title. She paused, leaning over the council table. He even had special ceremonial armor made for the occasion, with little Earth symbols he could dramatically cross out after each human colony he destroyed. Very theatrical. We found it in his quarters. My science team is studying it currently. The self-cleaning technology is actually quite impressive. Vex Noran's color had shifted from terror gray to a sickly green. You don't understand. No one could defeat Drek Thar in personal combat. He was genetically enhanced, cybernetically augmented. His personal shield technology was impenetrable. His combat reflexes were impressive, sure, nodded Reeves. The shield stopped energy weapons, projectiles, even most explosives. His augmentations gave him strength comparable to our heavy machinery. And his combat reflexes, well, actually, those were genuinely remarkable. Her expression hardened. But you see, that's the problem with being invincible for too long. You start believing your own propaganda. Drek never considered that while he was busy announcing his plans to exterminate us, we were quietly studying him. Every broadcast, every battle, every piece of leaked intelligence, we built a complete profile. She picked up the stasis field, examining the severed head almost thoughtfully. In the end, we didn't need to overpower his shields or outfight his augmented reflexes. We just needed to understand that even the mighty Supreme Overlord Drek the Magnificent, conqueror of the Hive, uniter of the Seven Systems, and self-proclaimed exterminator of Earth, still needed to breathe. She set the head back down, her voice dropping to a near whisper. It turns out that even invincible overlords need oxygen. Who knew? A painful silence hung over the council chamber. The floating head of Drek seemed to mock them from its stasis field, its 4 dead eyes staring accusingly at the assembled leaders who had enabled his rise to power. Commander Reeves straightened her posture and cleared her throat. When she spoke again, the casual sarcasm was gone, replaced by something more formal, more deliberate. Representatives of the Confederation, she began, her voice carrying clearly without any amplification. I am not here merely to announce the death of your Supreme Overlord. I am here to deliver a message from Earth Central Command. But first, I believe you deserve to know exactly how your invincible leader fell. She tapped a small device on her wrist, and a holographic display sprang to life in the center of the council chamber. The image showed a luxurious private chamber, adorned with trophies and spoils from 100 conquered worlds. Sleeping on an enormous, ornate bed was the unmistakable form of Drek. Security footage from 3 standard days ago, aboard his flagship, the inevitable Victory, Reeves narrated. Quite a pretentious name for a ship, if you ask me. But then, subtlety wasn't his strong suit. The footage showed a wall panel silently sliding open. From it emerged 6 humans in form-fitting stealth suits, moving with practiced precision. They surrounded the sleeping Overlord, each taking positions at specific points around the room. Team Phantom, Reeves explained. Special operatives trained specifically for this mission. For 6 months, they practiced this exact scenario in simulations, down to the millisecond. Tactical advisor Joel Carr leaned forward, her professional interest overcoming her hostility. How did you penetrate the flagship's security? The scanner grid alone should have been impenetrable? It was designed to detect weapons, explosives, energy signatures, Reeves replied. But we brought none of those. On the holographic display, one of the human operatives removed a small canister from their belt and carefully placed it near the sleeping Overlord's bed. A fine mist began to spray from the device. A synthetic compound based on your own neurosuppressive technology, Reeves continued. Colorless, odorless, and specifically designed to bypass Drek enhanced respiratory filtration systems. We developed it after analyzing tissue samples collected from battlefields where his troops were deployed. The footage showed Drek stirring slightly, then falling into a deeper sleep. The humans moved closer, one carrying what appeared to be a simple metal case. We could have killed him in his sleep, Reeves said quietly. That would have been easier, safer. But we wanted him to know who was killing him, and why. In the footage, one of the operatives administered an injection to the sleeping Overlord. Almost immediately, Drek 4 eyes snapped open. He tried to move, to call for help, but could only manage weak, uncoordinated movements. A paralytic agent, counteracting the sedative but leaving his augmented muscles temporarily useless, explained Reeves. His mind was fully aware, but his body wouldn't respond. His vocal implants were similarly disabled. Even his emergency beacon was jammed. We made sure he was completely alone, completely helpless, just like the human colonies he ordered destroyed. Science Director Zunra's manipulators clicked nervously. This is most disturbing footage. Oh, it gets worse, Reeves said grimly. The hologram showed a female human operative leaning close to Drek, speaking directly into his auditory receptor. Though there was no sound on the recording, it was clear she was delivering a message. With each word, the Overlord's eyes widened further in unmistakable terror. Captain Maya Chen, Reeves identified the operative. She lost her entire family when Drek ordered the bombardment of New Shanghai. She's reading him the names. All 4,137,912 names of the dead. We made sure he heard every single one. Commander Blyde's expression had shifted from rage to something closer to horrified fascination. How long did this process take? "17 hours," Reeves answered matter-of-factly. "We took turns reading. Made sure he stayed conscious for all of it." The footage jumped forward. Drek Thar, now fully conscious but still paralyzed, was surrounded by the 6 humans. Another figure entered the frame, Reeves herself, carrying a simple metal case which she opened to reveal medical instruments. After he heard the names, it was time for the extraction, she continued. "We needed certain biological samples for analysis, neural tissue, primarily, and we needed to confirm something our intelligence had suggested." The footage showed Reeves systematically removing components from Drek Thar's body, showing each to him before placing them in preservation containers. Most of his supposedly biological advantages were artificial, she explained, tapping another control to freeze the hologram on a close-up of a cybernetic implant. His genetic code had barely been modified at all. His fearsome reputation was built on technology, not superior biology. Technology that we've now thoroughly analyzed and improved upon. She closed the holographic display and faced the council directly, her expression deadly serious. "Now, to business. Earth Central Command has authorized me to make the following demands." She placed a data crystal on the council table, which projected a list of terms into the air for all to see. First, immediate cessation of all hostilities against human settlements and shipping. Second, withdrawal of all Confederation military forces from the sectors bordering human space. Third, reparations for the colonies destroyed under Drek Thar's genocide campaign. Fourth, and most importantly, a complete restructuring of the Confederation leadership. She gestured toward the severed head. "Consider this a first step in that restructuring process." Vex Noran found his voice, though it quavered pathetically. "You expect us to simply surrender to your demands? The Confederation spans 7 systems, hundreds of worlds. We have fleets that haven't been able to stop 17 humans from infiltrating your most secure facility and assassinating your supreme leader." Reeves finished for him. "But perhaps you need more convincing evidence of our capabilities." She tapped her wrist device again. "Captain Chen, demonstration alpha, if you please." Throughout the chamber, the lights flickered. Then, on every display screen and holographic projector, the same image appeared: interior security footage from various locations throughout the massive station. In each one, a human operative stood calmly next to critical systems, holding what appeared to be crude explosive devices. "As I mentioned earlier, my team has control of all essential systems on this station," Reeves said calmly. "But perhaps something more dramatic would better illustrate our point." She tapped her device once more. Demonstration beta. Through the viewport behind the council, a blinding flash of light erupted in space. When the automated filters adjusted, the council members could see the smoldering remains of what had been one of their most powerful defensive platforms. "That platform was crewed by 3,000 of our finest," gasped Commander Blyde. "Was it?" "Check your sensors," Reeves suggested. Science Director Zun Ra frantically worked her console. No life signs were aboard. The platform was empty. "We evacuated your personnel 6 hours ago," Reeves explained. "They're currently in holding cells aboard our vessel. Unlike your Supreme Overlord, we don't consider civilian casualties acceptable collateral damage." She rose to her full height, somehow seeming to tower over the aliens despite several of them being physically larger than her. "You have 12 hours to consider our terms. I suggest you use them wisely. Humanity doesn't want war, but as you've now seen, we are fully capable of fighting one." And winning. Chaos erupted in the council chamber the moment Commander Reeves finished speaking. The carefully maintained decorum of the 7 systems' most powerful leaders disintegrated like a plasma shield hit by antimatter. "This is an outrage," Commander Blyde roared, slamming his fist against his hover platform so hard that the stabilizers whined in protest. "The Zarkonian fleet will reduce your homeworld to cosmic dust for this insult. We will hunt every human to the edges of the galaxy." His ceremonial blade shook in his trembling grip as he pointed it at Reeves. "No species has ever dared to threaten the Confederation in this manner." "And how well did previous species fare against you?" Reeves asked calmly, not even bothering to look concerned about the weapon directed at her. "Oh right, they're extinct. Perhaps that explains our unconventional approach." Vex Noran, still visibly shaken, raised his hands in a placating gesture. "Commander Blyde, please. Violence will solve nothing at this juncture, he turned to Reeves, his skin now fluctuating between fear gray and diplomatic purple. Surely there is room for negotiation here? The demands you present would fundamentally alter the power structure of our entire civilization. That's rather the point, Reeves replied, leaning back against the council table. Your current power structure decided to exterminate my species. We find that problematic. Trade Baron Volek Fenn's tentacles writhed anxiously. The economic impact alone would be catastrophic. The withdrawal from border sectors would collapse trade routes established over centuries. Millions would suffer. Millions already have suffered, Reeves countered, her voice hardening. Human millions. The difference is, we're still alive to do something about it. Science Director Zunra had been silent, her manipulators working frantically over her datapad. Now she looked up, all 8 eyes wide with shock. I've verified the data from the demonstration. The defensive platform was indeed evacuated before destruction. More concerning, she paused, her voice dropping to a horrified whisper. I'm detecting evidence of systematic infiltration of our networks dating back 14 standard months. They've been gathering intelligence since before we even officially encountered their species. Diplomatic Minister Kara Tass, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke. We should consider their terms, she said simply. Her feathered crest remained flat against her head, a signal of extreme caution among her kind. Consider. Blyde nearly choked on his rage. You suggest we bow to these primitive mammals? These upstart primates who have barely mastered interstellar travel. These primitive mammals who just decapitated our Supreme Overlord in his sleep and infiltrated our most secure facility, Kara Tass countered sharply. Perhaps our assessment of their capabilities has been flawed. Tactical advisor Jo Huar had been unusually quiet, her reptilian features impossible to read. Now she leaned forward, her tail perfectly still, a sign she was in deep strategic thought. The human operation was impressive, she admitted reluctantly. The precision, the planning, the restraint. They could have killed us all, yet they chose to communicate instead. They're bluffing resources, Minister Ganpole insisted, though his gelatinous form trembled visibly. Their fleet can't possibly match ours. They control, 12 systems? Against our hundreds. Actually, Science Director Zunra interrupted. Our latest intelligence suggested they controlled 7 systems. But she paused, checking her data again. I'm accessing updated reports that indicate they've expanded to 19 systems in the past 3 months alone. A stunned silence fell over the council chamber. 19 Vex, Noran whispered. How is that possible? Such expansion rates are unprecedented. Their adaptation capabilities exceed anything in our historical records, Zunra continued, her voice growing more distressed with each word. Their ships are smaller but faster. Their weapons less powerful but more precise. They don't overwhelm with force, they target vulnerabilities with surgical accuracy. Most concerning of all, they learn from every encounter. Each time we've engaged them, their response to our tactics has evolved. Commander Blyde's rage was visibly cooling, replaced by something that looked suspiciously like fear. Are you suggesting they could actually defeat us? The entire Confederation? I'm suggesting, Zunra replied carefully, that our standard metrics for assessing military threats may be inadequate when it comes to humans. There's something else you should all consider, Reeves interjected smoothly. Your political structure was held together by fear of Drekthar. With him gone. She gestured toward the severed head. How long before your carefully balanced alliance begins to fracture? Already I can see the calculations behind your eyes, weighing whether this crisis might present opportunities. Vex Noran flinched visibly. Kara Tass's feathers ruffled in surprise. Blyde and Joel Carr exchanged a significant glance. You know nothing of our politics, Volksfen protested, but his tentacles curled inward, a telltale sign of dishonesty among his species. We know everything about your politics, Reeves corrected him. The Confederation is an alliance of convenience, not conviction. 3 of you. She pointed to specific council members, were plotting to assassinate Drekthar yourselves. 2 others were embezzling military funds. And you, Grand Counselor Vex Noran, have been secretly communicating with fringe worlds about forming a breakaway coalition. Vex Noran's skin turned white with shock, a color no one in the chamber had ever seen on his species before. How could you possibly know, he began, then caught himself too late. Reeves smiled thinly. We've been watching. Learning. That's what humans do best. While you were busy underestimating us as savage primitives, we were studying your languages, your cultures, your technologies, and your secrets. Looking around the chamber, Reeves could see the growing realization dawning on each council member. This wasn't just a military threat. This wasn't just the death of a leader. This was a fundamental challenge to everything they thought they understood about their place in the galaxy. Perhaps Caritas suggested quietly, "We should hear more about these terms." Commander Reeves nodded at Caritas's suggestion, acknowledging the diplomatic minister with a slight inclination of her head. A wise approach, Minister. Perhaps there's hope for interspecies relations after all. She moved to the center of the chamber, deliberately positioning herself in the focal point, where the Supreme Overlord would traditionally stand to address the Council. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone present. Contrary to what your propaganda has claimed, humanity doesn't want to conquer the Confederation. Reeves began, her voice clear and measured. We have no desire to rule over other species or claim your territories. That's never been our objective. Then what do you want? Trade Baron Volksfen asked, his tentacles now perfectly still in wary attention. The same thing most sentient species want: to live, to grow, to explore. Reeves paused, her expression hardening, and to ensure that no one ever again decides our entire species should be exterminated on a whim. She tapped her wrist device, and a new holographic display appeared in the chamber, a map of the galaxy with the current territorial boundaries highlighted. Human space was a relatively small cluster compared to the vast expanse of the Confederation. We're not seeking your territory or resources, she continued. Earth Central Command has authorized me to offer a permanent peace treaty with very specific conditions. Another tap brought up a detailed document that began scrolling slowly in the air. First, recognition of human sovereignty over our current 19 systems, plus a buffer zone to prevent future misunderstandings. The map shifted, showing a reasonable expansion of human territory. Second, a non-aggression pact enforced by mutual verification protocols. We inspect your military installations, you inspect ours. Complete transparency. Tactical Advisor Joel Carr's eyes narrowed. No species has ever been allowed to inspect Confederation military facilities. No species has ever put the Supreme Overlord's head on your council table, either. Reeves countered smoothly. Consider it a new era of interstellar relations. She continued, third, a joint commission to investigate war crimes committed under Drek Thar's rule, not just against humans, but against all species. This caused a visible ripple of discomfort around the chamber. Several council members exchanged nervous glances. And finally, Reeves said, her voice taking on a steel edge, a complete restructuring of the Confederation leadership into a truly representative body, with checks and balances to prevent any single individual from ever again wielding the kind of unilateral power Drek Thar possessed. Vex Norayan's throat sack inflated in agitation. You expect us to dismantle our entire governmental structure on your demand? I expect you to recognize a critical flaw in your civilization before it destroys you, Reeves corrected. Drek Thar was a symptom, not the disease. The disease is a system that allowed him to rise to power in the first place. She gazed around the chamber, meeting each council member's eyes in turn. To demonstrate that we're serious about peace, but equally serious about our demands, I'm authorized to share one final piece of evidence with you. Another tap on her wrist device, and the holoprojector displayed what appeared to be an ordinary asteroid belt. This is, or rather was, the Krell Dax Defense Array, your most heavily fortified military installation outside Confederation core worlds. 97 battlecruisers, 34 orbital platforms, and a command center staffed by your most elite officers. She tapped once more, and the image changed. Where the military installation had been, there was now simply empty space, with debris floating aimlessly. As with the defensive platform I destroyed earlier, all personnel were safely evacuated first, Reeves added. They're currently being held aboard human ships. All 27,000 of them. Commander Blyde shot to his feet. Impossible. The Krell Dax array was impenetrable. It would take an armada too. It took 5 ships, Reeves interrupted. 5. Using technology we adapted from studying your own weapon systems, her voice remained perfectly calm, which somehow made her words even more chilling. We call it the Quietus Protocol. Your sensors didn't even detect our presence until after the installation was gone. Science Director Zunra was frantically checking her data pad. "She's telling the truth," the arachnoid scientist whispered in horror. "Krell-Dax is gone, completely. Our last transmission from them was only 6 hours ago." Reeves let that sink in for a moment before continuing. "We could have deployed this against your homeworlds. We didn't. We could have killed your Supreme Overlord publicly, broadcasting his execution across your networks. We didn't. We could have assassinated everyone in this chamber instead of talking to you. We didn't." She stepped closer to the council table, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. "Because despite what Drek-Thar believed about us, humans prefer peace to war. We prefer building to destroying. But make no mistake," her voice suddenly regained its full strength, "we will not allow ourselves to be threatened with extinction ever again." Reeves straightened and gestured to the data crystal still projecting the treaty terms. "You have 6 hours to reach a decision. Not 12 as I initially stated. Consider the revised deadline a demonstration of how quickly circumstances can change. If you agree to our terms, we begin a new chapter in our species' histories. If you refuse," she glanced meaningfully at the severed head of Drek-Thar. "Well, I think I've made that outcome sufficiently clear." 5 hours and 57 minutes later, the War Council of the Seven Systems had reached their decision. The chamber, once opulent and imposing, now seemed diminished somehow, as though the very architecture had absorbed the shock of the day's events. Grand Counselor Vex Norayan cleared his throat, his skin a mottled mixture of colors, reflecting his conflicted emotional state. "Commander Reeves, after extensive deliberation, the Council has reached a consensus regarding your terms." Reeves, who had spent the intervening hours calmly sitting in the Supreme Overlord's ceremonial chair, another calculated insult that hadn't gone unnoticed, raised an eyebrow. "I'm listening." "We accept," Vex Noran said simply. Commander Blyde snorted derisively. Under protest, he added, though his earlier fury had cooled to a smoldering resentment. Noted, Reeves replied with a thin smile. "But irrelevant. Acceptance is acceptance, regardless of how it burns your pride." Science Director Zunra leaned forward, her manipulators tapping nervously against each other. "There is one matter we wish to address. The data you've shared suggests your technological advancement has accelerated at a rate that defies all known developmental models. Our scientists estimate you've compressed nearly 3 centuries of progress into less than 2 years. "Your point?" Reeves asked, though her expression suggested she already knew what was coming. "Such advancement is impossible." Without Zunra hesitated, then forced herself to continue, "without access to extremely advanced existing technology. Technology you could not have developed independently." A knowing smile spread across Reeves' face. "Very good, Director. I was wondering which of you would figure it out first." She stood and walked to the viewport, gazing out at the stars. "When Drek-Thar launched his first attack against our colony on Proxima Centauri B, he made a critical error. One of his ships was disabled, not destroyed. We recovered it, and more importantly, we recovered its database, including detailed technical specifications for every piece of Confederation technology." "That's impossible," Commander Blyde growled. "Military vessels have fail-safe protocols. The database would have been purged." "It should have been," Reeves agreed. "But it seems the ship's commander, in his arrogance, had disabled the fail-safe system. He didn't believe there was any possibility his vessel could fall into primitive human hands." Tactical Advisor Joel Carr closed her eyes briefly, recognizing the catastrophic security breach this represented. "Commander Valkyrin," she said quietly. "He was always overconfident." "His overconfidence was a gift to humanity," Reeves confirmed. "Within 3 months, we had reverse-engineered your weapons, your shields, your FTL drives. But we didn't just copy them, we improved them, refined them, made them better." She turned back to face the Council. "You see, that's the fundamental difference between our species. You've had this technology for millennia, yet you've made only incremental improvements. You've grown complacent, relying on your enormous empire rather than innovation. Humans, on the other hand," she smiled, "were very, very good at taking existing ideas and pushing them to their limits." Diplomatic Minister Kara Tass spread her feathered hands in a gesture of reconciliation. "Then perhaps there is much our species could learn from each other in this new era of cooperation." "Perhaps," Reeves conceded, "though I suspect the learning will be rather one-sided for the foreseeable future." She tapped her wrist device one final time. "Captain Chen, the Council has accepted our terms. Begin the withdrawal of our operatives and prepare my shuttle." Without waiting for acknowledgement, she deactivated the device and addressed the Council again. The treaty data crystal contains communication protocols for establishing the verification commissions and buffer zones we discussed. Earth Central Command will expect initial compliance reports within 1 standard week. Reeves reached down and deactivated the stasis field holding Drek Thar's severed head. With disturbing casualness, she picked it up by one of its cranial ridges. "I'll be taking this with me," she said, "as a reminder of what happens when someone threatens humanity with extinction." And the prisoner's Commander Blyde asked stiffly. "The station personnel, the crews from Krell Dax, will be released once our ships have safely departed Confederation space," Reeves answered. "Unlike your Supreme Overlord, we don't harm civilians or prisoners of war. That's another difference between us." She walked toward the chamber doors, then paused and turned back one last time. "One more thing. The ship we captured, Commander Valkren's vessel. Its database contains something else, interesting evidence that Drek Thar's rise to power wasn't entirely organic. Someone in this room supplied him with intelligence, resources, and political support long before he became Supreme Overlord." A deathly silence fell over the council chamber. "We know who it was," Reeves continued, her eyes sweeping across the assembled leaders. "That information is our insurance policy. Betray this agreement, attempt to retaliate against humanity, and that information goes public across every communication network in the 7 systems." She smiled pleasantly. "Peace between our species is in everyone's best interest. But just to be clear, we'll be watching. Always." With that, Commander Alexandra Reeves, the lone human who had walked into the War Council of the 7 systems holding the Supreme Overlord's severed head, departed as confidently as she had arrived, leaving behind a fundamentally altered galactic order and a room full of alien leaders who had just learned the most important lesson of their political careers. Never, ever underestimate humans. As the doors closed behind her, a soft chime sounded on Tactical Advisor Joe Hoare's personal communication device. When she checked it, her reptilian features froze in an expression of pure shock. The message was in perfect Zarkonian script, but its implications were clear. "We've had operatives embedded in your government for 11 years. Did you really think Commander Reeves was our only agent? This is just the beginning of our relationship. Sleep well." It was signed, Simply Humanity,